awful
on.
angle. Hi.
Hi. Let's see.
I'm on the road, and so I'm doing a makeshift sort of setup here.
Okay.
But hi.
Hi, nice to see you. There I am. Okay. All right, we're a couple minutes early, so it's all good.
Yeah, I wanted to be early because I wasn't, just want to make sure I was here.
Yeah.
Let's see, how can I do this? Setup. If I put this here, no, it's a little bit. I mean, that's bright enough, right? You can see me, right?
You look good. I
like,
see
oh yeah. In fact, maybe pull the camera back, Ronnie.
No, you're completely fine. How's your day going?
Okay. Good. Hold on, I think I just found something that can help. I'm in New York for the audiobook producers convention. It's called APAC.
Okay.
And it's Monday, and I happen to be here early, so staying with friends and getting a chance to catch up, and be in the city earlier. So yeah.
That's great. Hopefully we can get our other two, Emily and Gabra, on.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine doing this alone.
No. I have questions just in case, but let's see if they'll be able to get on.
Yeah.
Give it a couple more minutes. We're early anyway, so there's no rush here. Okay. Let me check my email.
Oh, there's Emily.
Oh, I see Emily. Let me invite. Emily, I'm going to invite you onto video. All you have to do is accept that.
What does it look like in this room?
Okay.
There we go. Hi.
All right.
Hi, Emily.
Okay, I'm going to adjust this. Hello. Okay. Sorry, this is my first time using a brand new iPad.
Nice. What a way to break it in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first time using it for camera. Oh, goodness. Okay. Hold on.
All right. We'll just wait a few more minutes, see if Gabra will come on. Let's see here.
Go that way.
Thank you guys for joining us today. I'm excited for our discussion.
Me too. Maybe. Oh, that looks great, Emily.
Yeah, I'm just going to have it sit up. Okay.
Awesome.
Hopefully it won't fall over. Okay.
It looks great. Yeah. Well, as I said, we'll wait a few more minutes. Firesiders, just waiting for our last speaker to pop in. And we're ahead of schedule, so there's no rush here. Give it another minute.
Emily, your landscape view is very cinematic.
Yeah.
You're very cinematic looking.
Should I have this on portrait instead?
It can work either way. It looks good.
I can see you just fine. I think it's great.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I've got this bare bulb in my face, so I have enough lighting.
Yeah. Well, the library looks awesome.
Yeah, so this is I'm staying with friends of mine who work in publishing, and they've worked in publishing for years, and like just the books, the collection of books is amazing.
On stage.
There's Ms. Zackman.
Okay. All right, Gabra. Let's see if you can get up here. Should work. I'll try one more time to invite you.
So help me out with understanding Fireside here. This is my first time using this
there she is.
System.
Awesome.
Hello.
I'm so sorry. I was in some other strange room, which was amazing. It was like being pranked in the best way ever. I like wound up in. I literally wound up in like someone's like tarot disco room, and I just want to say, I maybe I should have been in that room. Thank you.
Emily, what were you saying?
Are these recorded? Are they only
There will be a
available?
recording.
There will be a recording. Okay.
Yes, there will be a recording.
And then for Fireside in general, is it always recorded, or is it like, how does that work?
So as soon as I start the show, which I just did a couple minutes ago, we start recording, and then I can download our content and I put it on our YouTube channel. So you guys can share this, recording after, and I'll fix it up to make it look good. But there will be a way for you to access this again. And I think everyone's here, so we might as well get started. Any other questions before we jump in?
How long are we today? I don't even know.
About 45 minutes. So,
okay, cool.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello, Firesiders, and welcome to Adventures by the Book, where our mission is to connect people through the superpower of books. I'm your host, Amber Reinhart, and I'm excited for today's show because we have fan favorite narrators, Ron Butler, Gabra Zackman, and Emily Wu Zeller here to talk about diversity in audiobooks. It's going to be such a fascinating conversation. I'm very excited. And as I just mentioned before, today's chat is approximately 45 minutes, but it's intended as a conversation. So we want all of you in the audience to be thinking of your questions, book-related stories, or even just a hello to talk to our speakers. And you can do this by going into the round circle button at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and you can click on Jump on Stage, and then we will, pop you up and you can talk to our speakers. Today is episode 4 of our audiobook series, and the topic is diversity in audiobooks. I think we are all anxious to get started and hear more, so allow me to introduce our 3 speakers. So, Ron Butler is a Los Angeles-based actor with credits in film, theater, and television. As an audiobook narrator, he's received 2 Audie nominations and won 8 Audiophile Magazine Earphone Awards. He is a member of the Atlantic Theater Company and an IFP Award winner for his work in the HBO film Everyday People. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Gabra Zackman has been in the audiobook business for over 15 years, beginning when they were still called Books on Tape. To date, she has recorded over 500 audiobooks in all genres. She's an Audie and Earphones award-winning narrator who is equally at home recording romance, memoir, sci-fi, and fantasy. Gabra is sometimes referred to by the handle Audiobook Goddess. Welcome, Gabra.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
And last but certainly not least, we have Emily Wu Zeller, an American voice actress and audiobook narrator. She voices Pan and Palmer in CD Projekt Red's 2020 video game Cyberpunk 2077. My bad for my pronunciations, I'm so sorry. In the Star Wars canon, she is Dr. Aphra in the audio drama Dr. Aphra and narrated in the 2020 audio production of From a Certain Point of View, The Empire Strikes Back. Welcome, Emily. We're excited to hear from you today. Okay, so welcome everyone, and I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you on our discussion today on diversity in audiobooks. I'm going to jump off camera in just a second, but I'm going to be here to help facilitate the conversation. I have a couple questions prepared in case you guys don't have any of your own, and that's totally okay. But as I mentioned before for everybody, the theme of today is diversity in audiobooks. So I thought I'd kick off a question to ask each of you. So the need to make the field more diverse for narrators of color has become a central issue for publishers. But the particular demands of the job compared with film and stage acting make this tricky. So what do each of you think representation means when voice actors can only be heard and not seen? So let's start with you, Ron, if you have any thoughts on that, and then we'll just popcorn around.
Oh, wow. That's a great question, and that is a very big question. I'm going to start by saying first that I appreciate. Do you guys hear that? Is that just
yes.
me?
No, I definitely hear
okay.
it.
Okay. So I appreciate, and I want to say that foremost, the trend and the push that both traditional publishers and independent independent publishers, producers, and authors have been making towards greater diversity in terms of representation. And that is characterized not only in casting, but also the trade organization, the Audiobook Publishers Association, creating a diversity program with mentorship, and also companies like Penguin Random House having in-house mentorship programs to bring talent along, to service diverse authors and from diverse points of view with diverse actors. I love that it's happening, and I want to say thank you, and I'm grateful, and more, please. I think the idea
sorry, Ronnie,
of
can we interrupt? I'm sorry. Can we interrupt?
I'm gonna
Yeah.
troubleshoot real quick because I did that as well. Hold on, give me just a second.
Yep.
There
it
we
might
go.
be
There we go.
somebody's mic
Woo!
on. Yeah.
Yeah, that was it.
Awesome.
Okay, Ronnie,
I'm gonna
take the
say
stage.
that
We're good.
I
We're
was
good.
just like, I can't hear anything you're saying.
I'm grateful that there's diversity happening. To sum what I just said, I think that the first tenet, or the first idea, is that regardless of how people sound, people from diverse backgrounds, somebody that's, say, Black and queer, for example, comes from brings with them, in addition to their talent, a perspective and an understanding and a relationship to the material that's written from that background, that can not only support but infuse and lift that material even more, and speak their story, speak the author's story that they have in common. We know, the old, I think it's an African proverb that says, he who controls the story controls the world, right? And being in control of our own stories is, and being able to voice our own stories is a very important part of identity and of understanding. So that's my beginning 2 cents, and I'm going to hand it off to one of the ladies.
Excellent.
Wow.
Emily, you wanna answer?
Sure, I'll add
Yeah,
on.
I'm glad that Emily's speaking, because I don't want to follow Ronnie. Not that I want to follow Emily either, but
I will add to that it's beyond being able to accomplish an accent. First of all, accents are not universal. We might think that we understand what an accent is, but for example, I, as an actor, am not great at all of the different accents that are in the UK, because that country is not familiar to me. I'm not as familiar with the cultures that are there and with the different sounds that are there. I couldn't possibly hope to understand what all of the different cultures are within that one country, right? Now, there are some actors who do. That's maybe a bad example, because the UK is so the US is descended from the UK, right? So it is part of our major culture, and we share a lot in common, our primary not minority but majority culture here. The minority cultures have historically just, our stories have not been told, or they've been told in a way that has been very, very washed out, or very skewed. And so we're at a time when being able to even see these stories being told at all is huge. And because it hasn't historically been part of the greater narrative, there isn't a whole lot of familiarity that people who are not from these cultures have. So being able to represent ourselves, of course, is a very important thing. But additionally, other people trying to represent us would very, very likely, 99% of the time, fail, just because you can't possibly understand what comes from this minority culture, because you haven't been exposed to it, because those stories have never been told, right? And you haven't lived that experience. This, I think, is going to be an ongoing aspect of our discussion today, because what comes up often is that, what's the difference between lived experience and acting, right? And that's where we can speak to more about that, but I'll hand it off to Gabra from here.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I first want to say that I just want you all to know who's watching this now or at a later time that I've had corrective eye surgery, and I'm at that moment where I have to be taking drops where I'm like weeping all the time. So no, I'm not like a crying white woman in the midst of this discussion about diversity in audiobooks. But in some way, that's actually perfect, and I'm loving this. So
You're not just a
it's
crying white woman, Gabra. You're a crying,
I'm not just a
crying
crying white woman. I'm not just a crying white woman. But it's really interesting. I'm really glad to be here in this conversation because here's something that I don't think happens enough. I think the responsibility of speaking about diversity and the education that goes with it lands upon all of my BIPOC, Black, Brown, Indigenous friends. And it winds up not quite landing on white people. And while I think that we don't want to appropriate anything, and that's part of the reason why there's a long history of appropriation and making money off of other people's experience, which is why I think is one reason why we don't want to be the voice of, especially let's say from a first person perspective or from a majority perspective, why I wouldn't want to be the voice of something that I'm not, is because there is a lived experience. There's a history that none of us want to capitalize on, in which I think white people have profited off of the stories of our Black, Brown, and Indigenous brothers and sisters. That said, I do think it's really, really vital that when we have these discussions, that there is someone who I don't ever quite identify as all white. I call myself a crew. I'm a Jewish woman. So I think I'm like off-white. And yet, I have benefited from all of the things that go along with white privilege. And so I bear a certain amount of responsibility, and I bear a tremendous amount of desire in seeing true diversity. And I think it's really good to have someone like me pipe in, maybe listen more than I speak, but maybe also talk so that the burden is not upon my friends to always be the ones speaking and educating and saying why diversity is important. Why do I think it's important? I think it's vital that our stories begin to reflect the rich tapestry of all of who we are. And I think that there's been a long period of time in which they've been spoken from one portal, one place, one viewpoint. And I believe that we are much richer than that. And I believe that our stories are much richer than that. And I believe the purpose of our stories is to heal and transform the world. And I don't think we can do that if it's from one perspective.
Wow. Thank you guys so much. That was very insightful. Now I kind of want to talk about anglicized or loan word pronunciations and, whether narrators should anglicize the pronunciation of words taken from other languages. And so should audiobook narrators see their role as strictly interpretive, or should narrators convey the book in a way that remains true to the author's intent? What are your guys' thoughts on that? Anyone want to jump in or take some time to ponder?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
No, these are good questions.
Yeah, it's a really good question.
Yeah. I mean, it's again,
it's a sticky wicket.
Yeah, it's sticky. It's hard to draw a strong line. Especially because language in particular, and we're talking about the English language here, is constantly changing. That's the nature of language, is that it changes. So the dictionary is getting updated all the time. And so there are words, loan words, that we have a name for this phenomenon of when we adopt a word from another language into ours, right? And I think for the most part, in that case, if it exists in the English dictionary as its own word and as a loan word, as a new word, we can say it as American English speakers might say it. And again, we're speaking about English and American English in particular. That said, for somebody like myself who grew up raised as a Chinese American, my mother is Chinese American, and I speak Chinese, if I see a word that is perhaps like kung fu is a word that is gong fu, you can understand what I mean when I say kung fu. You're not gonna be like, what is that? You're gonna say, oh, in the context, when you would
Yeah.
otherwise hear kung fu, if I say kung fu, it's not gonna really throw you off that far, right? Chang sam instead of chong sam. Not that different. And it is actually directly from us. Typhoon, kowtow, even ketchup. Well, ketchup, I won't go so far, but ketchup is kids up. Like those are all loan words from Cantonese. But I'm not going. I will pick and choose in whatever, because I am the speaker of that original language, and I don't feel like saying it in the way that it originally is said will pull you out of the story, or is an attempt to. There's this weird phenomenon that was shared with me about, people trying to like show off somehow
Yeah.
when they say a word correctly.
Wow.
No, absolutely not. In this case, it is about trying to honor the language that it comes from. But if we're talking about in a book where you have a character that is, say, I'm only speaking about Chinese, is Chinese and is speaking in Chinese, and the word that it's not written in Chinese, it's written in English, but you're meant to understand that they're saying it in Chinese. And there's a word that pops up that could ostensibly be a loan word, but in this case is being spoken by and for Chinese people. Of course, I'm going to say it with a Chinese, in the Chinese way, right? Or all of us here narrate articles all the time for various news outlets, and this is a very hot topic. It always comes up because news articles are often covering the entire world, right? And so we have countries all over, and we have names and places all over. And each individual company kind of draws their own line about what they've decided are going to be the anglicized versions
rules.
of names. Yeah, and what we're going to try to adhere to. And I think for the most part, there's kind of an in-between space where they say, okay, well, here's how it sounds in the actual language for where this place is. And it's okay if you don't the R, or, do the extra roll or make the extra sound that doesn't exist in English, but try to get as close to this as you possibly can. Right. And then there's the ever big one. The last thing I'll say, the ever big one is Shanghai. The name of this people want to say Shanghai, and they say, well, we don't say Paris. I'm like, well, if it was written by somebody who is Chinese or is from China Chinese, and they're talking about their own country, it's Shanghai. If you're talking about the 1920s in the US or in the UK or Europe, and they were talking about the Shanghai this or that, fine. So it's context.
Yeah, my point was going to be, I think the question, Amber, is well, we're entering this phase along with diversity where with this kind of question in particular, it becomes very contextual, and it's actually changing. We're sort of in a place of expansion and growth and figuring it out and understanding what to do with when these things arise. So I don't think there's actually a solid answer yet. As Emily said, each company, each publisher, each producer sort of has their own guidelines about these kinds of things. And then even within that, sometimes people with guidelines go, but in this case, we leave it up to you, right? My example is whenever I see the country Chile, I want to say Chile. I don't want to say Chile, right? Because for me, it's like that's food. And I'm not Spanish. I've spent time in Spain. I've spent time in South American countries. I am not Spanish. But this is the United States and possibly Canada are the only countries that still say Chile when when the rest of the world doesn't. So I think we're behind on that. But that's just a personal thing. But in the context, if I'm doing an article that's like say an economic piece, and it's written by an American and it's a Wall Street thing, and they're talking about all the countries of the world, then I will do the anglicized saying of that, because that's a contextual choice, right? But if I'm doing a novel that's set in South America, or a character is traveling to South America, and a person from Chile says Chile, then I will say Chile, right? So it's an entirely contextual thing. And the only other thing I want to say about that is, I think your question, which I think is a wonderful question, may be conflating two things that we can talk about separately, right? The idea of anglicization versus not doing it, and the idea of are narrators meant to interpret or simply convey, right? Are had certainly have a cross section, but they are sort of they can be addressed and explored as separate topics.
Yeah, we can talk about it too if you guys
Yeah.
have thoughts on that.
Yeah.
I'm interested with your relationship to the author when you're doing this, and their interpretation of what they wrote. So, Gabra, any thoughts?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say, I'll answer quickly one thing and then another. The first thing I'll say is I recently read something, and this is really more accent than anything else, but it still, I think, applies, where I read one article where it was there was a tremendous amount of Hebrew in it, and it was focused on Ben Gvir, which I pronounced in this article, Ben Gvir, with the Israeli way of saying it, because I couldn't do an entire article. Ben. Then
we lost your sound, Gabra. Oh, we're back. You're back.
Oh, yeah, yes. So subsequently, maybe 2 days later, I read an article for a different company where it was all American, and his name was mentioned several times, and I said Ben Gvir, because I was like, this doesn't make sense for me to slip into like any kind of weird pronunciation. So I actually switched depending on the context of the two articles. I will say that with regards to talking to authors about this, if it's a book, that sometimes we have access to the authors and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have direct access to authors. Sometimes we have access through a publisher to an author, and sometimes we have no access whatsoever. And so it becomes very interesting that sometimes we have a tremendous amount of direction in a certain direction, and sometimes we don't have any whatsoever. So I had an instance recently where it was someone writing with a tremendous amount of language from, let's see, there was French in this book, there was Hebrew in this book, there was German and Polish in this book. And those words were to be pronounced, as Emily said, sort of a midway, like with some feeling and flair for the words themselves, but without doing fully, we didn't know those languages, myself and my co-narrator. And at the same time, the author, wonderful author, Jennifer Rosner, the author wanted just a feeling of the characters and not accents, even though it took place in a million different places, because she really wanted the story to be told. So that was very, very, very specific from the author, exactly what she wanted.
Wow. Thank you guys so much for all your insight on that question. I just want to remind the audience that we're at almost the 30-minute mark of our conversation. So anytime you want to jump up on stage and, ask our speakers any questions you have, you can do so by clicking on the round button on the left-hand corner of your screen. It kind of looks like a hamburger, and click jump on stage or speaker request, and we can get you up here. But in the meantime, I have another question for you all. So I think it's an ongoing challenge to cast appropriate narrators for books by authors of color. Any thoughts on how producers can better avoid typecasting in the audiobook production process?
Can you get more specific about the question?
Yeah,
typecasting for audio.
Is it like, from what I've seen, do you think that the same speaker is getting, repurposed just because of what they've done before? How do you ensure that the right narrator is picked for the book?
Right? Oh, you mean like actors getting pigeonholed with a particular character or genre or something?
Or genre, or
I think that's a fairly simple answer, which is to have auditions. So you have a piece of material that you feel, as an author or as a producer or both, that you take a piece of the material, and this would be no longer than 5 finished minutes of audio here.
Please.
That you send out as an audition so that you can hear what an individual will do with your material. And then just keep casting your net as wide as possible. And if you're looking for specific lived experiences from the actors, to put that in your audition notice.
Thank you. Any other thoughts before we move on?
No, I had one, but it left me when Emily. I was so paying attention to what Emily was saying, I
Sorry,
lost my
Mm.
thought.
stepped on you.
No, it's good. It was good.
No problem. I can start another one. So,
Okay.
some narrators say that they turn down jobs when they feel unsure about voicing major characters that are not their gender, race, or sexual orientation. So, can any of you speak to this or share an example of when this occurred to you?
Yeah, I've done that. I've done that a handful of times. I think that I've been in this business now. It's been actually about 20 years, and I will say that when I started out, there was not the kind of consciousness, not from me and not from the industry, that we have now. So, in other words, I think I did books 20 years ago, 15 years ago, that I absolutely wouldn't do now, because I would think that I was appropriating, misappropriating, or frankly taking work away from someone who would be a better storyteller and should get that work. But I have in the years, let's say in the last 10 years, I have multiple times said to people, this comes from a perspective. I know narrators who would be wonderful for this, who I think come from this background or will understand this background more than I would. And I don't think it's appropriate for me to do it. I have done that multiple times.
Thank you.
I've done it, and I think, and I know many of my colleagues that have done it in sort of in increasing measure. I think, the as Gabra said, starting 20 years ago, I think I started about 8 or 9 years ago, but the universe of narrators was smaller then, literally. And the universe has been of narrators has been growing and expanding, just through a natural growth process. Specifically with the pandemic, you had a lot of out of work actors and out of work actors that transitioned into audiobooks as a side gig because they weren't making any money because sets were closed. You had this big growth spurt, and then add on top of that this growing awareness and an idea to be more representative, in terms of identity and diversity. So the world has just gotten bigger. And before, you might say, okay, I've got this story that's set in East Africa. And before, you might have hired, a cis white man who was a popular narrator to do it. Now you have a lot more choices, right? And so you go from that to, well, at least let's hire somebody that's black, so that can be more representative. And if it's a black male character, let's go black male character. Oh, well, can we find somebody that's actually African? Can we find somebody that's East African, right? And we narrow down. I should have done that in reverse, because I think what publishers and producers are doing now is going, okay, we've got somebody from East Africa. I'm using East Africa because I just had somebody send me a book like this, and I was like, is there an East African? Is there a Ugandan? Is there a Kenyan, narrator that can do this? 2 years ago, we wouldn't have that. Today we do. Today we have a whole, we've a whole resource and actually sort of adjunct production companies doing audiobooks in Africa, and we have access to that. We didn't have that before, right? But 2 years ago we wouldn't. 2 years ago, a black African American, or black an African American narrator, male narrator in the United States would have been a first choice for this book, but it is no longer. From many producers and publishers, and myself included, right? I take the initiative to go, have you looked here? I can connect you with, I don't know if they're East African, but I know at least a few African narrators that at least have come with an experience of their country, and also are going to have the lilt and the accent without me having to put it on and work at it and try it. It's just going to be authentic, right? It's going to sound right to somebody who's African listening to it, right? Which is what I like to think of too. This book comes from there, and when this book is listened to by someone from there, wouldn't it be nice if it sounded like it was from there? I know I would feel that way about a book from the Bahamas, being from the Bahamas originally. Okay, I've talked enough,
Mm.
Gabra.
No, never. You have never talked enough, Gabra.
Emily, any thoughts?
I just, they both said it so well. It's true. I can think of a book early on in my career that I took, and I will say I was so new, I was so green, and I was so desperate for work. I didn't look closely at the book before I said yes, and by the time I was diving in, I felt so disempowered. I didn't feel like it was too late. I was like, I can't back out of this now. I have to do this. But the main character was a black man, and that is not part of my experience at all. Now, I didn't do an accent. I didn't do like a blackface or anything like that, but I still didn't represent it in any kind of authentic way, right? Like I had to really remove myself and treat it as just really just reading a book, which is not how any of us actually approach our work. We approach our work as delivering the text as a story, as it's meant to be immersed in. But in this case, I couldn't, because I didn't feel like that was appropriate. And that's something that if I could take back, I would. Absolutely. And then, but what Ronnie said, at the time, I mean, there was me and like two other people who were Asian female, period.
Right.
And so, our scope of what we had to cover was enormous. It was all of Asia, which is
Right.
enormous.
Right.
Now you have tons of options, which is great.
Thank you, guys. And we actually have someone who jumped up from the audience, Debbie. Would you like to ask a question or a comment?
Hello, everyone. Thanks. Hi. I'm not sure if it's really a question, but it might lead to a question. It's kind of a comment. This is a fascinating topic, and it's a bit tricky. And I'm a huge audiobook consumer, so I'm just going to share my experiences, and then I don't know what we do with that. So I had a book. I think it's a New York Times best-selling book that I so anticipated reading, and I had it on my to be listened to request at the library. And I finally got a hold of it after being on hold for about, 6-8 weeks before I got to it. And I was really disappointed because the author spoke with such a heavy accent, I could not understand it. And maybe that was just me personally. And I was so disappointed because it's supposed to be a fabulous book, and I'm sure it is. But I had to turn it in. I couldn't get to it. So eventually I may read it, I hope, in hard copy. But so that I'm sure she was authentic to the country, the nationality that she was representing for the book, but it was almost too much. I'm an American. English is my language, I guess I should say, and so that's what I understand. So that was disappointing. But then there was another book I read, and it was about a story set in Italy, and the narrator was clearly authentically Italian or just really had a good grasp of the language, because they even spoke some of the book in Italian. But you know what? I didn't have a hard time with that because of the way the story explained it afterwards, and so you understood what they were saying, and it just flowed. So from both sides. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention really quickly was, Gabra, I think you had mentioned that you voiced for Jennifer Rosner.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love her writing so much. So I didn't listen to her book, I read it, but I'd be curious to pick it up now. And was it The Yellowbird Sings, or was it another of her books?
No, this is a recent book that's just come out. Once We Were Home.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, I'll have to put that on my list. But anyway, I don't know if that's really a comment or a question, or if that leads to anything, but I just wanted to share that experience with you guys. This is a really fascinating topic, and I appreciate all your input. So thank you.
Debbie, before you leave, can I ask again? You said for the first book, it was read by the author, or was it read by a narrator, the one that you had difficulty understanding?
I believe it was read by a narrator, and I'm sure it was beautifully done. I just couldn't understand it. So it really frustrated me. I was so excited to read it, and so I had to turn it back in without finishing the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah,
for sharing that with us, Debbie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you guys for a fascinating conversation.
I know. I'm so glad you just said what you said, because I think, because someone is authentic doesn't mean that they're necessarily that they necessarily have it could have been beautifully told also, but it was just difficult to hear, right? I think that in everything that we do, we are always trying to hit a middle ground. I always
Hmm.
feel this way I feel this way, especially with regards to different accents, that we are trying to hit a middle ground where we are giving a feeling and a flair and an authenticity, particularly if it is our background, without distracting from the story. And that, I actually think that just takes a really, really experienced craftsperson. And that's something that the three of us, Ronnie and Emily and I, talk about all the time. Is
Yeah,
we talk about what craft is and how long it takes to really build craft. So I think it might have been a difficult place to find someone from, and they chose, probably the producer chose authenticity maybe over a longtime craftsperson. And in that case, I think like that's awesome that they took that risk. That's extremely cool that they did that. And also it's I would imagine for producers and publishers, it's complicated, right? It's a complicated um, especially if it's something particularly niche that you're looking for. Although I would say that I have a hard time myself sometimes understanding. I'm mortified that I'm going to say this, but I'm saying it, that every once in a while, even when I'm watching certain British or Irish dialects, I have to put the words on the screen also. I said it
absolutely.
there, I said it, and they're so
No, I
good and they're so authentic, and I just can't understand it. So I'm not sure
yeah,
what the balance is between that. Yeah, Emily or Ronnie, do you have thoughts about that?
I think we
yeah,
both do.
well, yeah. Yeah. Well, without knowing, what the particular niche was for this book that Debbie that you were talking about, this first one, um, there are also other parameters that go into people who are producing books. Time, they may not have a
Mm,
big runway, and they need somebody who is available now. Budget, whether for whatever reason, whoever is producing it may not have the budget to afford somebody who has 15 years in the field, and they might need to hire somebody who's willing to do it for much cheaper, which also may come with likely comes with a lot less experience. Those are other factors that could have gone into it. And sometimes, if it was the author, it's the author who staunchly says, no, I want to narrate my book,
yeah.
for better or worse.
yeah. Or the author says, I want this person to narrate my book.
Yeah.
Right, because they have that as a part of their contract negotiated that they can pick ultimately. So the idea of the best person for the job, that is, there's a wide interpretation of what
Mhm.
that can mean, and lots of variables. To use a unfortunately the seventh grade math metaphor, the Venn diagram of the background and the capability and what the author wants, that sweet spot in the middle. There may not be anybody that lands on that spot, and then they
Mm.
have to step outside of that spot. I will say, and I'm sorry, Emily, were you done? Okay.
Yes.
um when
Excuse me.
I've done uh, a couple of books set in the Caribbean, and in Trinidad in particular, VS Naipaul, a couple of different things. And when talking to friends of mine from the Caribbean, they've gone, "Oh, wow, that's so great. Did you really give it the accent?" And I was like, "Actually, not 100% as though I was living there." Right? I wouldn't do the
Mm,
same.
mm.
If people from this audience came with me to the Bahamas and heard me talk to my family, or even
Excuse
the
me.
friends here that I'm staying with, you would be like, Gabra, you'd be like, okay, I need some subtitles for that last little bit of what you said. And so I feel, and this is my own approach, I feel like my job is to actually serve as the widest demographic I can as possible while remaining true to the authenticity of the author and the location. And that is the finesse that I'm trying to achieve. That is the tightrope that I'm trying to walk. And I'm sure I fail at times, and I'm sure I succeed at times. But that is the job. That is the job I see as my job.
Yeah. It was really interesting. There was one time I had, I often in a lot of the books that I get have a Asian mother character. And there was one particular book, and whether I give her an accent always depends on whether the text says she has an accent or not. I don't automatically give them an accent because that's ridiculous. But in this case, the mother did not have one, I think, or the text didn't call for doing accents at all. So I didn't give her an accent. But I saw a review that said, "Oh yes, and Emily gave a lovely accent to the mother, and it's a wonderful job." And I'm like,
Wow.
wow. I mean, were you hearing my
Wow.
California accent? Because that's where I'm from. Like, that's what that sounds like. Maybe that's what you were hearing. I'm not from New England. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much, Debbie, for your awesome comment. That was such a great conversation. We are winding down on time, so if anyone else from the audience has a question or a comment and they want to jump on stage, please feel free to do so. But I have a couple of closing questions. So to all of you guys, what qualities make a great narrator? And do you have any tips for aspiring voice actors that might be in the audience?
Ooh.
Wow, like how much time do you have, and can we all get a drink?
Serious
think
with each of us.
can you have us back for another one of these where that is the only question and we talk about it?
Yes, we can.
But ask it again, please, because I was so filled with mirth I didn't although we didn't end it, but ask it again.
No problem. What qualities do you think make a great narrator? And if you have any tips for aspiring voice actors?
I think, okay, I'm gonna jump in here because they're both gonna make this sound better. A great narrator is somebody who understands storytelling and can look at a book, can read a book, and can understand what the author is conveying and convey it in a way that is believable and authentic, and pleasant to listen to. And I say that not in terms of like the timbre of the voice or whatever, but is a good technician, and so makes the actual listening of the story a pleasant experience all the way through.
Awesome.
I think the commitment, I think the number one thing for me would be the commitment to the story, and the story being above the ego of the particular performer. So being of service to the story is, I think, the primary thing. I think you have to have chops, meaning you have to know how to perform story, to tell story, to understand character arcs and story arcs and all those things, whether or not you do it intuitively or you've studied it, having a sense of that, and a sense of freedom and a sense of play. Those are acting things to push to the voiceover. But in terms of audiobook narrators, someone that thinks that the story is the most important thing and starts from there.
Amazing. Thank you, Gabra.
Yes, I don't like following Ronnie, and I have such deep respect for Emily as well, but I don't love following Ronnie. That's okay. It's fine.
You're funny.
I actually, no, stop it. I talk about Ronnie and Emily all the time, and I'm actually going to talk about them now with regard to this, to what makes a great narrator. Because here's how I feel about Ronnie and Emily. They are consummate storytellers. They have been in this business, but also just in the business of storytelling all their lives in different disciplines. They have great purpose, which I think is for me vital, and I think for me listening vital, that there is an overarching purpose to the work that we do. And I feel like they have great purpose. I also feel like they have great patience with the telling of a story. And I'll sort of wrap this into like a tip for beginners, which is that we talk all the time about this idea of storytelling as being, particularly audiobook storytelling, as going back to the time when we sat around campfires and told stories and no one was in a rush, and that we really got deeply inside the story and lived in that story and told it at our leisure. And I think that narrators who come from that perspective, who are able to, even with deadlines and this and that, who are able to get inside a story, inside the language, inside the words, and inside the story itself, and in a space of leisure, in the old world way we meant leisure, in a space of like deep enjoyment, tell that story, that is a real gift to the world. And both Emily and Ronnie, I think, embody those qualities so deeply, in addition to the fact that they're just really kind people. So they're two of my favorite collaborators. We are all actually collaborating. Emily and I have a
Yes.
company called Love Bites Originals. There's a company plug, everyone. That was not my intention, but
No,
we
plug
have a
it, plug it.
company. I'm going to plug it. We have a company called Love Bites Originals. You can find us everywhere, and we produce short form audio. This comes out of an idea initially that was Emily's, that Emily wanted there to be more short form audio that she was producing from a variety of writers, specifically for the BIPOC and LGBTQIA communities. And the three of us are together collaborating right now. We're all writing and creating stories together, which they are two of my favorite collaborators. They're two of my favorite narrators. They're two of my favorite people to create with. And that's how I will answer that question.
Oh, amazing. I loved all of your answers. Thank you so much.
Gabra, you're amazing. Thank you. Wait,
Takes one
I
to
have
know
to,
one.
exactly. I do have to say something again in follow up to what Gabra said about not wanting to follow me. She will not tell you this, but how many times when the three of us are having a conversation, I will ask for advice, or Emily will ask for advice, and I will say, you know what, I'm not going to speak until Gabra speaks, because she's going to say it far better than I am, and be far better at saying it than I ever will be. Emily can back me up on this. I say it all the time. It's true.
All the time.
So.
You guys
Okay,
are all
Amber,
amazing.
shoot.
Where can fans find you guys on social media?
Ooh, yay! I love that question.
That's my last question.
Ronnie's the most enthusiastic. So Ronnie, you go first.
So I'll
You're
go.
the most
Okay.
enthusiastic.
I mean, on all platforms, and I'm sorry to be confusing, but on Facebook and Twitter, it's just Ronnie Butler, RONNIE BUTLER, and on Instagram, it's Ronnie Butler Jr. with a JR, Ronnie Butler Jr. And that's TikTok. So we'll see after today how much longer that lasts. Just TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I was going to say something that had to do with the project that we just started earlier this week. The three of us, speak very regularly, and we felt like people might enjoy or appreciate or want to participate in a way in the conversations that we've had in private about this industry, about things that impact this industry, most recently AI, all of these things, and we decided to take these private conversations public.
Wow.
If you look for us on social media, you'll see us talking about the next time we do that. It's going to be a regular thing. We're still figuring out what we're going to call it, but it's the three of us talking about issues like this and other issues that impact our lives as performers and artists.
Oh, that's incredible.
Ladies, where can they find you on
I'm
social media?
Zwooman, ZWOOMAN, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm not terribly active, but I am on there.
Yes, and I'm there's usually my name is involved generally somewhere. So Twitter, it's Gabra Zackman. On Instagram, I have two. One is Gabra Cadabra NYC, and audiobook stuff goes under Audiobook Goddess. And then on Facebook, Gabra Zackman Author. And I have websites as well that are Gabra Zackman and Gabra Zackman Author that target the different things that I do.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight and for the incredible insight you provided on our topic, diversity in audiobooks. And I want to thank our audience for tuning in and listening.
Yes, thank you, audience.
Yes.
And like I said, we will be posting this recording on our YouTube channel for everyone to share and rediscuss. And next week, be sure to join us Thursday, March 30th for the 5th and final episode of our audiobook series, TikTok for Books. So until next time, ask yourself this: what is your next adventure by the book? Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for
Thanks
jumping
all.
in. Thank you.